Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the ultimate weaponry tier list for Helldivers 2. Isn't that fabulous? So this is for Helldive difficulty, but scaling any of this down will work just fine, and I put a lot of work into testing each weapon on stream so I could get a lot of different perspectives and feedback from everyone for the best use case for each weapon. All these VODs are timestamped and linked down below for you if you want a deeper dive, so just thank you guys for being such an amazing community and helping me out so much, and make sure you join the Discord if you want to become a part of it. But we also have some raw weapon data to support our weapons, though, and this amazing guide was put together by the Shack Attack and will be the first link in the description. It has pretty much everything you need to know about the raw damage of each weapon and is simply visualized for us, which I really appreciate. But to clarify, you can't base a weapon's value off of raw stats alone. It's just a good aid to help us understand the base values, because the reality of something like the spray and pray in-game is that it literally can't kill eggs. So its effective damage is in the negative, which is why all these ratings are heavily based off of the in-game testing and will also be based off of what they're good and bad at, while looking at how they handle or feel to use and balance your loadout. For me, something that clears chaff really well in some medium targets is the perfect primary weapon, because it covers all the weaknesses of most of my builds, and since most people's builds revolve around the railgun, I think this will be fairly consistent, because my main weapons are the railgun, the autocannon, and the anti-material rifle. So our S tier is the strongest god tier weapons that will get value no matter the situation. A tier is very strong but don't quite measure up to the best. B tier is balanced or niche and can swing into A tier if you're good with them, or C if you're bad. C are things that just don't really feel good to use, and our cute little dumpster fire is cooking everything that just flat out sucks and is never worth using. So lighting this off, we'll start with the best weapon in the entire game and our only S tier primary, the SG-225 Breaker. Its total effective damage per magazine is basically double the majority weapons in the game, and consistently backs this up by one-shotting every light target with well-placed shots, and can take out most medium targets without thinking. It's also a fully automatic shotgun that makes you feel like Terry Crews from The Expendables when he's blitzing through the basement with his full auto shotty, and that's all I can really ask for in any game. So this is the main weapon pretty much everybody uses and that I use in my solo no death runs, and is the perfect companion to round out any build. And I personally don't think this weapon needs any nerfs, as the current state of Helldive difficulty relies on its strength and consistency for a smooth experience. I just think that the other weapons in the game need to be brought up to where the Breaker is, so we can have more options and open up more loadouts without feeling bad about using them. But I'll touch on each weapon and what I think they should do with them, because feeling like the railgun is the only decent support weapon is really bad, because a lot of these primaries just don't round your kit out. And there's no better example of that than the Breaker Spray and Pray. I showed the clip already, but it can't even kill eggs. I don't really know what to say about this weapon, but out of any game that I've ever played, this is easily one of the worst weapons, if not the worst. It's honestly impressive how bad it really is, and there isn't a single situation where you would ever bring this weapon, because it's way too inconsistent and you can't rely on it to kill anything. Usually I'd make a meme joke, but this weapon is just so unbelievably bad that it's just straight into the dumpster fire. And the only suggestion I have to make it any better is just a complete overhaul. I don't think that I really have anything that I could remotely say that could make it good in its current state with minor buffs. So hopefully that gives you a scale and gauge of how I'm doing this weaponry tier list. But moving on, we have the fire shotgun. For my community, this has been a long-standing meme ever since I shot Dark Tide's version through the center of a wall, killing everything on the other side. Now this one's not that broken, but it's very good, and it will be entering the A tier. Its overall effective damage output is very consistent. It's amazing at killing all of the light targets versus the Terminids and versus the bots. It seems to trigger the aim protocol thing that makes them more inaccurate as they take damage. I do need to do more testing on this, as that part can be inconsistent, but overall, the more I take the fire shotgun in, the more I like it. And the only way to make it better for me is to just give it a full auto option. And I think that fire damage in general should stack on targets per hit to reward a fire focus build where multiple sources of fire could benefit from each other. But now we have the SG-8S Slugger, and it does take some getting used to, but it has a lot of potential in the right hands. With the medium peen, it can also strip armor in certain situations, and it lets you blow out a lot of targets you wouldn't expect. But it has extremely limited ammo, and how you reload it starts making it feel bad when you're getting swarmed on Helldive by either faction, where the ability to spray down ends up winning out most of the time. So the Slugger for me is going to end up in B tier as more of a niche weapon that I think if you practice with, it can easily swing up into the A tier but never C. The only thing I would like to see change for it is a slight reload speed increase and a better snapshot after reloading to give it more situations where it would shine as a primary weapon, because its damage is already very consistent. But the SG-8 Punisher feels very inconsistent. It's just not as bad as the Spray and Pray, and in my opinion, it falls behind the Slugger quite a bit. So it's going to be locked into the C tier. And I personally don't have any ideas on how to make it better other than it becoming the Slugger, and everybody I've talked to basically just turned it into the Slugger too. So if you guys have any suggestions, I would really appreciate the extra help on this one, and I'll probably put the best ideas in my feedback form. But moving on to our special weapons, we'll start with the Scorcher. This is something I started using in my support build because I needed more range pressure with the grenade launcher, and that ended up covering the ammo economy problems I had with it, making it feel amazing to use. The extra explosive damage to flesh feels really powerful, so after you get good with the Scorcher, it feels extremely rewarding versus the Terminids, And even versus the bots, it feels pretty good at removing the medium enemies. You can even blast the walkers in the upper plate and the explosion will kill the guy on the back, and this makes it an easy A tier weapon for me. The only thing I would change is to increase the magazine size by like 5-ish and add 1 or 2 magazines baseline, so it would still be very ammo hungry, but be better in more builds. Then we have the Scythe. This is the laser beam, and it's okay in the cold, but really bad in the heat, and on average, it takes too long to do anything. Not being able to stagger enemies out of their call-in alarm is brutal, and genuinely, it just doesn't feel very good to use for me in its current state. So I'm going to be locking this one into the C tier, and I think it's in a very similar situation to the laser cannon where it struggles at medium plus, and it should reward you for beaming the same spot, letting you melt through or strip armor off, and also have a stacking damage for keeping the channel going longer. That way you risk burning out your heatsink for big damage, and I think that weapons like this feel really good when they have a risk versus reward like that. But our Jar 5 Dominator is our last special weapon, and is a weak point focused explosive weapon that feels great to use. Its damage is amazing, but unfortunately it's unreliable in most firefight and real situations because of how clunky and slow it is. And it really needs to be the aggressor to feel powerful. A lot of people compare this to the bolt gun from Warhammer, and I think it is really cool, but I think that our Dominator for me is going to end up in B tier because there's a lot of situations where it starts struggling when I'm being chased down or under heavy fire, and I feel like the Scorcher just does everything the Dominator does better. Right now I think that's just because of weapon handling, so I think if they made that smoother, it would have a lot more situations when spraying it down would feel impactful and wouldn't force you to be the aggressor to feel good. More damage isn't always the solution. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for them to increase handling and make this a weapon that rounds out tons of kits and makes tons of different weapons feel good to use. But moving on, we have our first pay-to-lose weapon, the Knight SMG. Basically, there's no reason to take this after you get the Defender, and I don't think they should touch it because it's a paywall weapon for the special edition. It shoots really fast and the spray down is really cool, but it's going straight into the C tier. And the only reason I bought it was to test it for the tier list, so thank you so much, channel members, for funding my nonsense and my ridiculous amount of sunglasses. But after that, we have the Defender, and it's going to be locking itself into the A tier. The ability to shoot one-handed while moving feels really good. The Knight can do this too, but this one's basically a beam, and it's amazing at removing all the threats you're bringing it for. The only thing it doesn't have is penetration, but I think that's okay, plus the combo to be able to use it with the ballistic shield is really cool, even though it's underused, and I don't really have any suggestions to make it better because I think it's a pretty well-tuned weapon. But one of our most balanced weapons in the game is the regular starting Liberator Assault Rifle. It's very good at removing all the light targets and has great handling overall and feels amazing to use. Is just a basic AR. The only reason it falls behind the Defender for me is mobility, so I think that the regular Liberator is a really solid B tier option that probably just needs more ammo to feel better on tier 9. But the Liberator Penetrator starts being extremely inconsistent on the harder difficulties because of its scope being so busy. It basically becomes unusable, and as a weapon that's supposed to be focused on pinpointing weak points to penetrate, only being able to hip fire it feels really terrible, and you're forced to use the semi mode to make the most out of it because burst just wastes a ton of ammo. Plus, all the stratagem weapons you take remove what this weapon would bring to the table. So for me, the Penetrator is going to be C tier. And honestly, would probably jump up tiers if they just reworked the sights. Then we have the Explosive Liberator, and initially I thought this thing was terrible, but started respecting its ability to stun things. The Explosive Shot does feel very impactful. It's very good at killing all the light enemies, and the explosive bonus damage to flesh makes it very consistent against the Terminids. So if you think of it as a support weapon, it's probably B tier versus the bugs, and C tier versus the boss. After that, we have our marksman rifles, and the regular Diligence is the first one you get. It has great gun handling and really shines versus soldier bots. I started bringing this in a whole bunch, and I'm starting to like it more and more just because I'm bored of using the breaker. And the only thing I wish it had was a little bit more consistency. When I'm aiming in on some medium targets, it feels like the sights are almost a little off, but overall I think it's another niche weapon that feels really good in the B tier for me, and it needs its fall off damage fixed a little bit, plus that scope problem that I'm having, but it might just be a skill issue. I'm not too sure yet. What I am sure about is that we have a problem when we compare it to the counter sniper variant. The Diligence CS just feels like garbage to use. The gun handling is so clunky. It's the Dominator, but doesn't shoot cool, impactful bullets, making it lack punch, and somehow also has terrible accuracy with limited ammo. And a problem with both is sighting in on anything over 100 meters feels like a waste of time, and that feels bad for a marksman rifle. So this currently does not have a place in the game for me at all, and it needs a fluidity pass, so it's going to be into the C tier for me because nothing's really as worthless as the spray and pray. Then we have our sidearms, and just so nobody gets confused or intentionally tries to misunderstand this, these are in a different category from primary weapons as they are secondary weapons. So for me, the P19 Redeemer is basically the perfect sidearm. Its spray down is very accurate, the ability to move and shoot feels great, and being able to remove light targets that are inting at you from the bugs gives you a lot of breathing room when you need it, and it's great for the bots too. It's exceptional versus the chainsaw guys that run you down, and this is easily the S tier sidearm to take with pretty much any build. Then we have the Peacemaker. This is the starter pistol, and after using it more, I realized that it has a lot of potential and is just a really well-balanced starter weapon with a fast reload that for me belongs right in the B tier. If they just expanded the magazine size a little bit, I think it would honestly even be an A tier sidearm. But in the Revolver's case, it feels terrible compared to the other pistols. The inconsistencies it has when you aim in just don't feel good, and we learned that revolvers don't have to feel bad to use. We've seen them done well before as hand cannons that reward blasting weak points, so I think if they gave this the ability to blow out medium targets consistently by giving it a usable sight and more damage, it would fix a lot of its problems and have a way better place in more kits, opening up more options. So for now, the Revolver is going to be C tier for me because it has too many negatives. Having the drawback of reloading one shot at a time while also having inconsistent damage just doesn't feel very good on the hardest difficulty. But finally, we have grenades, and the impact is the definition of power because of the way impact and explosive damage register and scale in the game. This can remove any threat the flat out best with some practice and is going to be our S tier grenade option. Then the high explosive grenade is consistent, has no weird gimmicks, and it's great for shutting down bad situations, closing bug holes, and killing buildings because it's so easy to use. And once you get good at cooking it, you can do some pretty crazy things. So for me, the high explosive grenade is one of my personal favorites, and it's in the A tier. Then we have the standard grenade, and when compared to the last one, it just doesn't hit the mark, and I feel like it can be inconsistent, so it needs a larger radius or more consistent damage in its radius. So for me, this grenade's dropping into the C tier. Then we have the fire grenade, and I feel like it's in a weird place where I think it's extremely niche, but throwing it on top of a bug breach helps soften up a lot of the targets or even remove the light targets in a lot of situations. It's also just as good as the other grenades for removing holes in buildings, so I think it's a really solid B tier niche pick. And again, I think fire stacking would make some really cool builds and reward you for bringing multiple fire weapons. And finally, we've come to a close with the smoke grenade. I did some disgusting things with it on stream the other night, but I do still think this is a solid B tier pickup. It's just that smoke is extremely niche and only certain people will get value from it, but the people that do use smoke well know how strong it can really be. I just think that you should get more at a baseline because it is purely a support grenade, but that also finalizes our tier list, and I think that after heavily testing each weapon, it gave me a different understanding of the game, and the original direction seems to be that primary weapons were supposed to round out your kit, so that way you would be able to use something thematic and cool like the machine gun by taking something like the Jar 5 Dominator for larger targets. And I'm assuming we'll see attachments or some level expansion on these weapons in the future because I think most of them are just incomplete at the moment. When I look at the grand scheme of the game right now, it kind of seems like the current meta of just like beating tier 9 is just a take the best possible thing. And we've been doing like fun meme loadouts on stream or whatever, but like you can see a definitive difference. And I would really like to see them buff a lot of these things so that way we could have a lot more fun, cool, interesting loadouts. Now, it could just be me in theory crafting Dreamland, but that's a lot of fun for me. So that's going to be all for now. And I wish you guys the best of luck out there.